নমস্কার। অভি দত্ত মজুমদার স্মারক বক্তৃতা অষ্টম বর্ষে আপনাদের সকলকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। দীর্ঘ 2 বছর পর আমাদের আবার মুখোমুখি সাক্ষাৎ হতে পারছে আজকের দিনে। আপনারা প্রায় প্রত্যেকেই আমাদের পুরনো বন্ধু এবং প্রত্যেক বছর এই স্মারক বক্তৃতায় আপনারা 26শে জুলাই আমাদের সঙ্গে থেকেছেন এবং আমরা চেষ্টা করেছি একচেটিয়া আগ্রাসনের বিরুদ্ধে যে মানুষেরা নিরন্তর কাজ করে চলেছেন, গবেষণাভিত্তিক কাজ যারা করছেন, আন্দোলন যারা সংগঠন করছেন, যারা প্রতিনিধিত্ব করছেন, এদের সকলকে নিয়ে আমরা 26শে জুলাই এই দিনটিতে একটি পাবলিক লেকচার অ্যারেঞ্জ করব এবং তার মধ্যে দিয়ে একটা জনমত গঠনে আলাপচারিতায় এবং আমাদের মধ্যে যে বিতর্ক রয়েছে তাকে আরও উন্নত করে তুলতে চেষ্টা করব। একচেটিয়া আগ্রাসন বিরোধী ফামার পক্ষ থেকে এই চেষ্টাই আমাদের থেকেছে। আপনারা জানেন একচেটিয়া আগ্রাসন বিরোধী মঞ্চ ফামা 2008 সালের 26শে জুলাই থেকে পথ চলা শুরু করেছিল। সেই দিক থেকে দেখলে 26শে জুলাই ফামার প্রতিষ্ঠাবার্ষিকী এবং আমরা 26শে জুলাইয়ের সভাকে প্রতিষ্ঠাবার্ষিকীর সভা হিসেবেই উদযাপন করে আসতাম। এই প্রতিষ্ঠাবার্ষিকীর সভাতেই আমাদের যে পাবলিক লেকচার এটি অনুষ্ঠিত হতো। ফামার গঠনে, ফামার আন্দোলনকে এগিয়ে নিয়ে যাবার পথে বিজ্ঞানী অভি দত্ত মজুমদার ছিলেন অন্যতম মূল প্রেরণাদায়ক শক্তি। অভি দত্ত মজুমদারের আকস্মিক মৃত্যুর পর থেকে 2014 সাল থেকে প্রতিষ্ঠাবার্ষিকীর এই সভাকেই আমরা অভি দত্ত মজুমদার স্মারক বক্তৃতা হিসেবে পালন করে আসছি। সেই হিসেবে এবছর অষ্টম বর্ষে পা দিচ্ছে। আপনারা জানেন এ বছর অষ্টম বর্ষে আমাদের দুজন বক্তা রয়েছেন। আমাদের মধ্যে আছেন সতীশ মিশ্র। অ্যান্টি পস্কো, অ্যান্টি জিন্দাল যে মুভমেন্ট দীর্ঘদিন ধরে উড়িষ্যার জগৎসিংহপুর ধিনকিয়া অঞ্চলে চলছে, তিনি সেই আন্দোলনের প্রতিনিধি হিসেবে আজকে আমাদের মধ্যে আছেন এবং সেখানকার কথা তার মুখে আমরা শুনব, আমরা বোঝার চেষ্টা করব এবং আমাদের সমর্থন, আমাদের সহগামিতা ওই আন্দোলনের সাথে তাও তার মধ্যে দিয়ে আমরা জানাবার চেষ্টা করব। এছাড়া আমাদের মধ্যে আছেন সিআর বিজয়। তিনি আদিবাসী রাইটস, অরণ্যের অধিকার এই বিষয় নিয়ে দীর্ঘদিন ধরে কাজ করে চলেছেন। তিনি দক্ষিণ ভারতের মানুষ, কোয়েম্বাটুরে থাকেন এবং দীর্ঘদিন ধরে ভারতবর্ষের নানান জায়গার আদিবাসী আন্দোলন, অরণ্যের অধিকার আন্দোলনের সাথে তার ঘন সংযুক্তি রয়েছে। বিভিন্ন জার্নাল, পত্রিকায় এ বিষয়ে তার গবেষণামূলক লেখাপত্র আমরা দেখেছি। আজকে তার থেকে এই পরিস্থিতিতে যখন ভারতবর্ষের অরণ্যাঞ্চল, বনাঞ্চলকে ধ্বংস করে দেওয়ার পরিকল্পনা চলছে এবং সবথেকে বড় বড় কর্পোরেট আগ্রাসনগুলো নেমে আসছে ভারতবর্ষের এই প্রাকৃতিক সম্পদপূর্ণ এলাকাগুলোর ওপরে, সেখানকার মানুষ কি বলতে চায়, কি জানাতে চায় আমাদের, সেই গল্পই উঠে আসবে তার কথায়। আমরা সেটা শোনার চেষ্টা করব, জানার চেষ্টা করব।
आजकार ये अभी दत्त मजूमदार मेमोरियल लेक्चरर में आप लोगों ने मुझे बुलाया और कलकत्ता में हम लोग उड़ीसा में सोचते हैं इंटेलेक्चुअल लोग ज़्यादा रहते हैं, ज़्यादा इंटेलेक्चुअल डिस्कशन होता है। वही कोलकाता में किसी जगह में आके वहाँ का दुख दर्द, उड़ीसा में एक स्टेबल गवर्नमेंट चल रहा है बोल के सारा देश में एक आइडिया है, और स्टेबिलिटी का पीछे कारण क्या है ये समझाने के लिए आप लोगों ने मुझे बुलाया। इसलिए मैं आशीषदा से बहुत आभारी हूँ। आप लोगों ने, यू पीपल माइट हैव रेड हाउ मच लैंड डज ए मैन नीड, टॉल्स्टॉय का प्रमुख कहानी है। परोसमनी तो सबने देखा होगा और जो उत्पल दत्त का जो कैरेक्टर, वही कैरेक्टर घूम रहा है। हाउ मच लैंड डज ए मैन नीड? हाउ मच लैंड चाइना नीड? हाउ मच लैंड ए कॉरपोरेट नीड? इन द नेम ऑफ डेवलपमेंट ये लोग हमें बता रहे हैं हम लोग विकास कर रहे हैं। विकास ऐसा एक नाम है, पेरेंट्स अपना बच्चा का नाम भी विकास देते हैं, सोचते हैं बड़ा होगा विकास करेगा। विकास का ये जो डेफिनेशन पिछला 8 साल से बहुत द्रुत बदल चुका है। लेकिन उड़ीसा में विकास बोलने से पहले हम लोगों को समझा गया स्टील प्लांट ही विकास है। नवीन पटनायक जी का पिताजी बिजू बाबू जब चीफ मिनिस्टर थे, लोग इन्हें वोट इसलिए दिए थे कि बिजू बाबू उड़ीसा में राउरकेला का बाद एक दूसरा स्टील प्लांट बनाएंगे और वही विकास होगा। उस वक्त दिमाग में ये नहीं था कि स्टील प्लांट बैठा देने से विकास नहीं होता है। और स्टील ऐसा ही प्रोडक्ट नहीं है, स्टील हो या एल्युमिनियम हो, तांबा हो, जो कुछ भी हो, कॉपर हो, जो कुछ भी हो, ऐसा एक प्रोडक्ट नहीं है जितना उत्पाद करोगे वो मार्केट में चला जाएगा लाइक हॉट केक। बहुत चीज़ डिपेंड करता है, मार्केट का कंडीशन, मार्केट कितना नीड करता है वो भी डिपेंड करता है। लेकिन उड़ीसा में विकास का नाम में जो चल रहा है ये टिपिकली एक लैंड ग्रैबिंग सिचुएशन है। ये आज नहीं, नवीन बाबू का टाइम में नहीं, नवीन बाबू का टाइम से पहले ही शुरू हुआ है। जब ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट टीवी का जमाना था, कांग्रेस पावर में था, तब उड़ीसा का टेलीविजन में एक आड़ आ रहा था। गोपालपुर और सी बीच में एक कपल जा रहे हैं, एक बच्चा आकर के मूंगफली बेच रहा है, मैडम लीजिए, वो फेंक देता है, भागो यहाँ से। और दूसरा शॉट में 4-5 यूथ एक हाथ में एक डिग्री पकड़ के दौड़ के आते हैं स्वप्न का वास्तवता के लिए गोपालपुर में टाटा स्टील। गोपालपुर में तब से दमन शुरू हो गया टाटा का स्टील प्लांट के लिए। आज भी वो लैंड टाटा स्टील का पास है। 2970 एकर्स लैंड टाटा स्टील का पास है गोपालपुर में। वहाँ भी एक छोटा सा पोर्ट है, सिर्फ पारादीप में नहीं, गोपालपुर में भी पोर्ट है। 2970 एकर्स लैंड टाटा का हाथ में है। टाटा जब बंगाल से जा रहा था, गया गुजरात नानो का कार बनाने के लिए। कितना नानो आज घूमता है मार्केट में, रास्ते में कितना नानो आप लोग देखते हैं, एक भी नानो प्रोडक्शन नहीं होता है। वहाँ का कुछ लीडर्स बोले, अरे भाई तुम्हारा तो 2970 एकर्स लैंड पड़ा हुआ है, यहाँ आ जाओ, वहाँ क्यों जाता टाटा? इसे तो लैंड चाहिए था। गोपालपुर में जो चाहिए टाटा को मिल चुका है। वो भाग गया गुजरात, कुछ लैंड मिल गया इसे। अब देखिए वेदांता जो नियमगिरी में आज भी लोग लड़ रहे हैं वेदांता का साथ। वेदांता गया नहीं है कंप्लीटली, लोग लड़ रहे हैं, लड़ाई चल रहा है। अनिल अग्रवाला फाउंडेशन एक दिन सोचा कि पुरी में कुछ लैंड लिया जाए। पुरी में कैसा लैंड लेगा? पुरी में फैक्ट्री बनाना आसान नहीं है। पुरी है, कोणार्क है, जगन्नाथ जी का मंदिर है, मोनूमेंट है, वहाँ इंडस्ट्री कैसा बनेगा? तो लैंड तो चाहिए इसे। उस वक्त बीजेपी और बीजेडी दोनों मिलकर के पावर में थे। 6000 एकर्स लैंड, मोस्ट ऑफ देम बिलोंगिंग टू जगन्नाथ टेम्पल। वहाँ काजू हो रहा था, वहाँ धान हो रहा था 2 टाइम, पान भी हो रहा था, बीटल हो रहा था। गवर्नमेंट डिसाइडेड इट विल बी गिफ्टेड, लेट मी टेल द वर्ड गिफ्टेड, to Anil Agrawala Foundation. After that debate and to create the Vedanta University bill, वेदांत यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम में एक बिल आया, मतलब जो यूनिवर्सिटी वेदांता बनाएगा वो यूजीसी का एक्ट में नहीं आएगा। वेदांत सोचेगा डिजाइन कैसा होगा, सिलेबस कैसा होगा, कौन प्रोफेसर रहेगा, कौन पढ़ेगा, मिनिमम क्वालिफिकेशन क्या रहेगा, वेदांत नहीं अनिल अग्रवाल फाउंडेशन डिसाइड करेगा। हिस्ट्री है उड़ीसा में। संडे में एतवार को विधानसभा चला। आज तक विधानसभा नवीन बाबू का टाइम में किसी भी टाइम में कंप्लीट डे नहीं चलता है। बिल पास हुआ, उसका बाद विधानसभा में डिबेट हुआ। एक प्राइवेट लिमिटेड कंपनी अनिल अग्रवाल फाउंडेशन का नाम ले कैसा लैंड एक्विजिशन गवर्नमेंट करेगा। एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर, रेवेन्यू मिनिस्टर, लॉ मिनिस्टर, 3 persons were from BJP. Education minister saw a document in the assembly. No, Vedanta is a public limited company. That document went to ROC. ROC told Vedanta Foundation Limited is a private limited company. That means land cannot be given by the government to Vedanta. लोकपाल थे उस समय उड़ीसा में। लोकपाल बोले वेदांतों को जमीन नहीं दिया जा पाएगा। Government went to High Court of Odisha. High Court told the same thing. And High Court also told, who is responsible for this? The official should be punished. Should be punished. After that was the main official, principal secretary to chief minister. He became the chief secretary. And retiring from the chief secretary, he joined as vice president of Vedanta. Now, Vedanta is in Supreme Court. How smoothly they are taking land from Odisha. In 2006, 13 tribal people were killed in Kalinganagar for Tata Steel plant. 13 people were killed. Commission, 3 people changed in the commission. No one found guilty for that. It is in Odisha. Odisha में कुछ भी हो सकता है, क्योंकि एक स्मूथ, एक पीसफुल, एक नंबर 1, एक टॉप एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव चीफ मिनिस्टर है। लेकिन ये बात पॉलिटिकल हो जाएगा, फिर भी मैं बोलना चाहता हूँ, ओडिशा, भारत में ओडिशा इज द ओनली स्टेट, ए स्टेट हैविंग नो चीफ मिनिस्टर. Chief Minister is completely defunct and inactive. He hardly attends the assembly even. Since last 25 years, he has never made a press conference. This is the situation in Odisha. And this is very much smooth for the corporate to grab the land. You'll be surprised. 12 years back, a ship shrinked in the port of nearby the Paradip port. 23,847 metric tons of iron ore was loaded in that. The engineer, chief engineer of the ship died. 25 or 26 people were staff of that ship. They rescued. The ship was taking iron ore to China. It is the only thing came out. Who is the owner of the ship? Who was sending the material? To which company it was going? Materials came in the stockyard. In the stockyard, it's stored in Paradip port, then loaded to the ship. Then the transport work was going on. Unfortunately, the ship shrunk down. CBI investigation is going on since last 12 years. No one is responsible for that. Saha Commission, he gave a report. Due to mining, mismanagement in it, Odisha lost 69,000 crore, not minerals, as revenue. Odisha government lost 69,000 crore as revenue. It was the time when Manmohan Singh was going. Modi was to be elected. Saha Commission gave the report. The report is still there. This is the condition of Odisha. And also told Sundargarh and Keonjhar district, where the basic excavation, mainly excavation, the mines and minerals are there. The tribal people of Odisha, per day income, since last 20 years, was 9 rupees per day, not even 10 rupees. Because the excavations were nothing was were doing manually. This is the situation of Odisha. ओडिशा में अगर लैंड खरीदना है तो आपको कैपिटल सिटी में भी मिल पाएगा. ये सिचुएशन है उड़ीसा में. दूसरा एक बात भी है, वो है एनपीए. किसी को इंडस्ट्री के लिए इन्वेस्टमेंट करना भी नहीं चाहिए. पहले गवर्नमेंट परचेज करेगा, गवर्नमेंट एस्टेब्लिशमेंट खड़ा करेगा, बंद कर देगा. नीलाचल इस्पात निगम लिमिटेड, व्हेन जिंदल was dancing with stick through police in Dhinkia, that time a government sector, Nilachal Ispat Nigam Limited, was closed at Kalinga, nearby Kalinganagar area. That was an old company since last 20 years. When the company got a mine, the mine clearance, mineral clearance from Forest and Environment Department, after that, government thought company is in loss. Till company had mines, he was purchasing from the open market. Company was sustaining. When Devegowda was Prime Minister that time, 56 इंच का नहीं, 5-6 इंच का छाती होगा, सीना होगा इनका. He contributed 140 crore rupees for the government company. Now Tata is owner of the company. This is in Odisha. It happens in Odisha. People gave land, 2,500 acres land people gifted, happily gifted. They thought our people will be engaged, our children will get job. And finally, that government property handed over to Tata. Bhushan Power and Steel Company, that is another company. The company's bank loan was 47,157 and 158 crores. Sajan Jindal Company settled it in 19,000 crores. Took over the company. Bank didn't get rest of the money. It was NPA. But the newspapers in Odisha, for some days, got full page, full 4-color ad. It happens in Odisha. And the police, the administration, the bureaucrats, the corporate, with some goons, can do anything in Odisha. Previously, people were saying it is POSCO Vedanta government. Now they are saying this is Vedanta and Jindal government. You'll be surprised, on last 3rd January, there was 3 PILs by different organizations in Odisha High Court against atrocity of the police. पुलिस घर में घुस रहा है डंडा पकड़ के, औरत को मार रहा है, बच्चे बाहर नहीं जा पा रहे, किसी को भी खींच लेता है, किसी का नाम में वारंट बोल के अरेस्ट कर लेता है, कुछ भी करता है पुलिस. Honorable High Court made a committee, appointed 2 advocates even, instructed them to go to the place and talk to the people. When the committee came, in front of the media, the people came to express their grievance. The goons attacked them. Nothing could happen. They went back. Again, Odisha High Court told, committee will go, district administration will help. Yes, district administration helped. The tent and other was made by Jindal company. Food and other hospitality are made by Jindal company. The officials at the court had sent. They entertained in some hotel by Jindal company. Administration was responsible. That's why police escorted. Our people, 40 to 50% of our people could not enter into that. Even media persons could not enter into that. But media was not unhappy in that. After that, High Court told, give some affidavit. Some pro-Jindal people also did it. Yes, we are happy, company should come. Many anti-people gave. Chief Justice found this and told, this is the responsibility of Minister of Forest and Environment. Through the district administration, please send thousands of affidavits to them. Advocates told, sir, Ministry of Environment and Forest is not a party over here. ठीक है, वो देख लेंगे. This is the situation in Odisha now. The local inspector in charge and the SP of Jagatsinghpur, previously both were in Puri. There was a Hajat Mrityu over there and it repeated in Dhinkia. Hajat death. Nothing can be done. Yes, there are cases in Human Rights Commission. Teethless, boneless commission, it is there. Every day, friend was telling, every day, if who is in WhatsApp group, he finds a message, this man is arrested. And the local goons arranged by the police, 30 to 40 people, any person, me even, because I stay in Bhubaneswar, any person now entering to the village are telling they are outsiders. Medha Patekar is outsiders. NAPM leader Prafulla Samantaray is outsider. The neighboring district people are outsiders. The left leaders are outsiders. They are being returned from the place and police is briefing to the media. They were outsiders. If there is some disturbances, it is among the villagers, they will settle it. They are not ready to make them entry to their village. Outsiders. POSCO is insider. Jindal is insider. Local SP not talk in Odia, he is insider. And we people are outsider. And unfortunately they are briefing to the press and press is not ready to make any question how they are outsiders. Now 3 panchayats and 11 villages are full with police. People are every day framing in false and fabricated cases. Still people are abandoned from the village, absent from the village. 1,000 above people are filed with 72 cases. Mainstream leaders, frontline leaders, 7 to 8%, including 2 ladies, 2 women, are still in jail. पुलिस रिमांड में लेकर के आएगा. देवरंजन स्वामी बोल के फ्रंटलाइन लीडर है एंटी जिंदल मूवमेंट का, रिमाइंडर में लेकर के आएगा, इसका गांव तक लेकर के आएगा और इमीडिएटली मतलब वो अरेस्ट होने का 10 दिन 12 दिन 15 दिन का बाद इमीडिएटली वो बालू का नीचे से बोलेगा अरे एक रिवॉल्वर मिला है यहाँ से. We found a revolver. He didn't cooperate with us. He attacked us and he was running away from us. 3 cases being arrested. And finally, police lost a case from inside the jail over a mobile phone. He was threatening to the government advocate why she is opposing his bail. It is another dafa. This is happening in Odisha, in India. One 80-year man was arrested. The case was being pending from the time of anti-POSCO movement. Now, Jindal is supposed to establish a plant for cement, plant for steel, plant for thermal power, and plant for captive port also. 400 kilometers distance, Jindal being awarded with 4 mines for iron ore. And in cement plant, as you know, after China, India is the second producer of cement. Those people are not interested for cement plant. On air, it is 40 kilometers distance to Konark, the Black Pagoda temple. No problem, it can be done. To Jagannath temple even, Puri. नवीन भाई, मोदी भाई, भाई भाई का रिश्ता है. एनवायरमेंट क्लियरेंस मिल गया, फॉरेस्ट क्लियरेंस मिल गया, पोर्ट के लिए मिल गया, प्लांट के लिए मिल गया. कोई जरूरी नहीं ग्राम सभा बुलाने के लिए, क्योंकि एमओयू क्या हुआ है किसी को मालूम नहीं. एमओयू में क्या लिखा हुआ है, किसने एमओयू किया है, आरटीआई में कुछ अवेलेबल भी नहीं है. आजकल ओडिशा गवर्नमेंट एमओयू नहीं देता है. एमओयू हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ है वो भी मालूम नहीं है. फाइनल जो आदमी कोर्ट में जाएगा, कोर्ट बोलेगा एमओयू दिखाओ, वो ढूंढता रहेगा एमओयू कहाँ है, एमओयू कहाँ है. बट लैंड एक्विजिशन इज गोइंग ऑन. एंड दिस इज ए साइक्लोन जोन. सुपर साइक्लोनिक स्टॉर्म 1999, you might have remembered, 20,000 people were dead in the same area. But fortunately, that Dhinkia area was saved due to mangrove forest and sand hills. The sands are being looted too now. Lakhs and lakhs of trees are being cut down. लोगों ने केस किया है फॉरेस्ट राइट एक्ट के अधीन, इंडिविजुअल फॉरेस्ट राइट एक्ट के अधीन. People are dwelling over there since minimum, having document since last 100 years. When it was a movement against POSCO, government had filed case against 2,500 people. Among them, 500 were women. 440 cases were being lodged. Still, 400 cases are pending. People are afraid to go out of the village. I told you before some days, one 80-year-old old man was arrested and finally bailed. 5 people were killed. People got mad. Police, 2005 to 2017, that time, पुलिस का कैंप स्कूल में ही चला. बच्चों का पढ़ाई का क्या हालत होगा आप लोग सोच लीजिए. And after 5 rapporteur of UNO blamed India government and that Korea government, after 2 years, POSCO went back. Land is same, case is same, activities are same. Still, land acquisition work is going on. What happened that time? Government acquired 2,700 acres land and told that it is the land bank. We are creating a land bank. From this land bank, we will give to any corporate. And now, another acres and acres, more than 100 acres land are under acquisition. From last December till date, entire Dhinkia is gherowed by the police. Patna, 3 hamlet villages, Patna, Mahala and Dhinkia. 3 villages are one name, Dhinkia. Dhinkia, Nuaga, Gadakujang. There are 3 panchayats. Those 2 hamlet villages were with Dhinkia, now being made as separate revenue village. People told, Are, we are under that village. Our village will be recognized. Why you are opposing? We told, ठीक है. After the jindal and disturbance end, let's sit and decide. They told, no. That is the strategy of the government to divide the people. And Dhinkia, Patna, Mahal, Gobindpur and Trilochanpur. Among these, Trilochanpur is not in Jindal's map. Why? There is no land in Trilochanpur. Trilochanpur land is already given to IOCL, Indian Oil Corporation Limited. That's why people oppose. You ask why people oppose. Not a single man of Trilochanpur having a job in IOCL. Some people are working as Mali, Chaprasi, peon on contract basis. Some local people. And most of them left the village to do some labor works in Chennai, in Surat and elsewhere. People have seen the misery. And when the land acquisition goes on, this is a big scenario. Some people get some money, purchase car, vehicle, all the things. After that, Sahara-like company, chit fund company, they send their agent, give your money, 1 lakh rupees, will be double by 6 months, another 1 year. It is gone in another way. Some educated people, they got some money. In the same time, Odisha found mushrooming of engineering colleges. Boys started studying over there. They thought, after the education, we'll get job in the industry. It is happening all over the Odisha. It is happening all over the Odisha. Now, 40,000 acres of land of Paradip, nearby Dhinkia, are under industrialization. They commonly shout for one thing, not for job, not for employment. They are united, 100% united for one thing. It is super specialist hospital. It is not only Dhinkia and the periphery area what will be affected after this industrialization. The Environment Committee reports, the Pollution Control Board of Odisha declares almost all the rivers of the state, the water is polluted. Not even for drinking, in maximum places, for bathing purpose also. The RO technology water is available in city areas. Input a 1 rupees coin, get RO water, 1 liter. Otherwise, they are distributing cards. The card cost is 25 rupees. It will be renewed in some, till 2 years, it is not being renewed, renovation. a renew of this card is not necessary. You will get purified water. ये कोई शौक नहीं है घर में आरओ टेक्नोलॉजी का मशीन लगाने के लिए, पानी पीने के लिए. This is the necessity in Odisha now. We are purchasing milk packet 25 rupees. We are purchasing water in 25 rupees a bottle. There are some remote areas in the bank of Mahanadi where government itself installed 3 to 4 Athagada and Badamba kidney dialysis machine over there. There are villages. All the village dwellers are suffering by unknown disease due to water pollution. Kidney, liver, jaundice, skin problem is going to aggravate the state. This is the situation in Odisha now. ये जो जिंदल कंपनी बनाने के लिए सरकार पुलिस का हाथ में डंडा पकड़ के घुमा रहे हैं, इसके लिए ग्राम सभा हुआ नहीं है. मैं तो बोलता हूं एमओयू भी हुआ नहीं है. लोगों को प्री इंफॉर्मेशन ऑफिशियली दिया नहीं गया. बात तो होना चाहिए डेमोक्रेसी में. अरे भाई बात तो होगा, बात होगा कि नहीं होगा. इंडस्ट्री आएगा, कंपनी होगा कि नहीं होगा, कैसा होगा, डिजाइन क्या होगा, कौन बात करेगा? आईआईसी के बात करेगा. अरे मैं तुम्हारा बात, लीव इट टू मी, अलाउ योर विटल वाइन टू बी डिस्ट्रॉयड. It is officially not in your name. Though you are using this 100 years, allow this. तहसीलदार बात करेगा. It is not being done. Only mental harassment to the people for whose interest? For whose profit? Case, goons fear. But it will be an idea. If people are so much suppressed, then company will go on. It can be done. But in the last February and March, in the Panchayat election, in other places of Odisha, it is either BJP or BJD. But in this area, vote is a secret process. Jilla Parishad member, Sarpanch, nominee, ward member, nowhere were elected the candidates selected by BJP or BJD. What it proves? What it proves? It proves people are not happy, people are still opposing. Demolition of beetle vine is the only routine work of the police. People are engaged in beetle vine, fishing, fish culture, paddy, yearly 2-time rice crops they were making. And we tell it pan baraj, beetle vine. They send it all over the country, even to Nepal, to Bangladesh, to Mumbai even, because it is very much tasty. You'll surprise. The groundwater there is sweet. Though it is coastal area, surprisingly it is sweet. Due to water sweetness, beetle tastes different. And beetle such a farming, it is done by generation to generation. Entire family involved in that work. Most of the families were getting minimum 20 lakhs per annum from beetle vine. That is being demolished. In the last 2020 Hampan, it is demolished. And in the COVID lockdown times, they also, those people were nearby periphery area doing beetle vine. The beetle leaves perished. After that, someone distributed a leaflet among the entire villagers. Someone distributed. Who distributed? No one know it. आगे थूकना मना है. आगे ये कोविड नहीं जाएगा. आगे थूकना मना है. You can't spit. So, government will give some money, surrender the land. ये बीटल का पान का चास आगे नहीं चलेगा. And we denied people, this will not be possible. And then people, how they pressurize us. And the people came to us, Are, nothing will happen. We can't sustain in beetle business. COVID will be there. No one can spit outside. For the coming 100 years, government is giving us some money. Then you give us some money. Or we will give, surrender our land to them. How they are dividing the people. And another thing is that there are 30 to 50% Dalit and a small group of tribal people are there who are also engaged in this agricultural business. The paddy, vegetable, beetle, cashew nut and other business. But they are landless. Now, if some compensations will be given to the landowner, what they will do? In Nuaga, there are 560 families, they are scheduled caste or Dalit. In Godakujanga, it is 1106 family, they are Dalits. And in Godakujanga, there are Santalos, tribal people also, it is 36 family. In Dinkia, 4,263. All total, 5,965 families are Dalits and landless. What they will do? Who will recognize them? They have not land. And also, they are suffering in cases. People are hiding outside. And this machine, this mobile is making very much easy to arrest someone else. People are staying nearby village, in their cousin's house. Some people in Cuttack and Bhubaneswar. You can't talk them over telephone even. If you talk 4 to 5 days continuously, police will trap them, threat them. Yes, Dinkia police will not come to Bhubaneswar, but will threat their near and dears. Your cousin is staying in Bhubaneswar. You will be arrested. And people are working outside the village, going to office, small business. They are unable to go out of the village. Jindal and police, government goons, organizedly distributed foreign liquor at the time of election. But the result was reverse. This is the situation of Dhinkia and all total moment of Odisha. I told the role of judiciary, I told the role of administrative, I told the role of corporates. I request you people to decide or to suggest what could be done to save Odisha. Again, thank you all and assure you, ये लड़ाई चलेगा. Revolution will go on.
Greetings to all of you. A forum against monopolistic aggression. Monopolistic aggression, very relevant today and going to be increasingly relevant in the future. I'm not going to give any fiery speech to provoke you emotionally. Nor am I going to I'm not going to make any suggestions, nor going to make any analysis. All that I would try to do is to flag and list in a narrative, time narrative scale of things that happened. I'm sure that all these things, or most of these things, all of you are in some form or other already aware. It's going to be quite simple, and it is just for you to consider, reflect upon, and think ways by which one can perceive or imagine or visualize what could be the direction to resolve the kind of conflicts and complexities that we see around us. It will be in two parts. The first is about the rise of the corporate state. And the second part would be, again, a listing of things that has already happened and what message those incidents give to us. Does it make any sense to us? The nation states emerged with colonialism and the post-colonial period. Nation states are associated with this notion of national sovereignty, sovereignty over a geographical area of the natural resources, of the economy, production, what is produced, whether any foreign investment is required or not, if so, how much, from where, should we import, if we import, what to import and what not to import, if we are to export, what to export and what not to export. In other words, these were all basically considered as protective measures required by the new nations or by the nation states to protect its capital, its wealth, and its growth. And when they say growth for, it's a domestic sector, basically domestic sector. Now, as this progressed, what we also saw was, despite every nation trying to protect itself and ensuring that it grows faster, the fact that there were inequalities across nation states led to what we call as neocolonialism. And because of this neocolonialism, because of what we have heard, the imperialistic notions or imbalance in trade or unequal trade relationship. Certain nations accumulated rapidly, certain nations exploited the other nations, and therefore we had developed nations, developing nations, and underdeveloped countries. Those days, these underdeveloped countries were called as Third World. The developed nations accumulated capital, accumulated more and more capital, and then comes the period when there is inflation. A little bit of inflation is considered to be good for growth. But what we saw at the time was that there was an inflation, but growth was not there, there was stagnation. So a new word even was coined called stagflation, that is stagnation plus inflation. At the same time, the third world countries were getting deeper and deeper into debt. So on the one hand, too much capital with the people, the developed nations who were lending to the third world countries. And this kind of, what do you call, stagnation in the global growth led to the question of what is wrong in the economy. So effectively, there were a number of, at that particular moment in time, that is, it started in 1970s, at that particular moment in time, there were a number of things that were happening. One was the Vietnam War, where you have a political military takeover, trying to take over a nation, which failed. You had what is called as the backyard economy, where dirty industries were pushed into Mexico by US. Yes, there were profits, but not that great. Then there was a third approach in South America, basically supporting dictatorships, military dictatorships, investing capital, US companies moving there, guarded by the paramilitary forces or even by the military forces. A lot of profits, but then you don't know how long you can harvest the profit. Any day, the system would collapse. And then there was the fourth category, the experience of South Korea and Taiwan, where aid was given, infrastructure was built. Aid was given primarily by US and Japan. Rapid growth in the 1980s in South Korea and Taiwan. There was what is called as the hollowing out of industries from US and Japan, mostly electronic industry. Those days it was television, tape recorders, stuff like that. The earnings per dollar, the investment, earnings per dollar of investment in these two countries were reasonably good, but what was more important was it was sustained. That system then spread to the various other Asian countries, and it was called as the tiger economy. And then we heard that considering the huge debt that many third world countries have, in order to save them from total collapse, the structural adjustment program came, the World Bank, IMF, and then you have what is called as the globalization and liberalization. Which essentially meant that, that you're opening up the market for capital to flow in and out of any country, any moment, as fast as one can see. And this essentially changed the notion of national sovereignty. Because the moment when capital is moving in and out, a major component of what you call as national sovereignty is lost. Subsequently, all other forms of national sovereignty, except the geography, is lost or getting diluted simply because nation states have now to cater to the needs of capital and of market. So this is the kind of transition that takes place. In other words, there is a weakening of nation states. Along with that, during this period, especially after the Second World War, you find the rise of various international mechanisms, the League of Nations, the United Nations. Various multilateral and bilateral institutions start emerging. And it was, mechanisms like the World Trade Organization. If you're talking about environment, International Union for Conservation of Nature, you name it, in every field, both governmental and intergovernmental and non-governmental international mechanisms starts emerging. It was believed that these mechanisms will provide avenues for countries to to reason things out and to trade without any conflict, trying to meet the needs of the people, take care of environment, etc. Then we see that gradually these mechanisms starts weakening, the UN mechanisms, the expectations on the UN mechanisms not really fulfilling. We also see the emergence of newer kind of bodies, like for example, you have the regional bodies like Association of Southeast Asian Nations, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, that is SARC, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD countries, the Asian Development Bank, regional banks, BRICS Development Bank now. So essentially, there is a feeling that these kind of mechanisms are actually not producing the kind of results as we expected. This is one part of what seems to have emerged. Now, during the same period, another phenomena starts emerging, what has generally been labeled as the neoliberal reforms. Now, if you look at that particular period, particularly if you look at the later part of 1980s and the 1990s, a lot of new things starts emerging, new concepts. It was felt that a democratically elected governments is absolutely necessary for growth and for capitalism. So democracy became a very good word. It was necessary, it was felt that transparency is good, accountability, right to information, participatory approach. Incidentally, in World Bank parlance, participatory approach is under the heading cost recovery. That is, if people participate in any project, that much money is saved. So it's already earned. So it comes under cost recovery. You have what is called as a rights-based approach. Then comes sustainable development, inclusive development, and now Millennium Development Goals. Now, with all this, along with this, every factor of production, whether it is labor, entrepreneurship, land, and in natural resources, all these things are brought under the market frame. Everything is to be monetized. In fact, India is now going through a plan of monetizing and working out something like 6 lakh crores. It's called monetization pipeline, And the whole question is now every state, including right up to the panchayat level, is to identify what are all the public assets and to see what will be its market value. And that is not enough. It doesn't come to that much. So therefore, you need to rapidly increase the accumulation of capital by the big business, by the big corporates, so that they will put in the money, the balance money. One can also relate to a number of things which are happening, like what Satish was mentioning about what is happening in Odisha, or in fact, you can actually link the farmers' 3 bills to the need to generate, for corporate sector to generate and accumulate capital. Now, along with this transition, you actually see a lot of changes, infrastructural changes, pockets of affluence spreading around. Suddenly we saw, earlier we felt that there was no trickle down. Now suddenly we see that, there seems to be a trickling down. More and more urbanization is taking place. Now, along with these changes, which happened in the 1990s, the aspirations of people also rose up. But at the same time, we see that the gap between the affluent and the masses also increased rapidly, a kind of situation which has never been there in the past. The gap between the rich and the poor, is so rapidly increasing, and people, you might have heard about the kind of huge quantum jump that companies like Bill Gates type of companies, during the pandemic period, the amount of profits that got accumulated as never before. So seeing this kind of affluent becoming more and more affluent also leads to a rising anger. You had in the US what is called as the 1%, against the 1%, or what is called as the occupation movement. People are saying 1% control most of the capital, and that cannot be permitted. Now, you also see that with the rising anger, you also see that the reasons for the rising anger is also provided. You point out at the other. The immigrants, the migrants, the refugees, linguistic groups, religious groups, communalism, very emotive, provocative kind of, anger at the other. This distortion of disaffection also rapidly increases. Amongst the others, there are also earlier it was the Soviet Union which was a problem. Today it's more focused on Russia and China. In the economic sphere. I'm not referring to the more popular subject of terrorism or that matter. I'm just on the economic front. It is Russia and China is now the target. Now, along with that, you have the conflicts over land and natural resources. Increasing conflicts. It was also recognized, you must be very clear that it is also recognized that in order for me to buy a land or a resource, the first requirement is that I should know whom to approach. When I know whom to approach, the next thing is that, by legally I should be able to buy it from you. Buy it or, whatever, enter into an agreement or whatever. In other words, it was recognized that globally countries, the lot of resources had no clear clarity in terms of, who has rights over those lands and resources. So after 2000, maybe I think about 2003, 4, 5, 6, around that period, these issues started coming up. Many multinational companies started going all over the world. I mean, their capital was flowing all over the world, but many places they were confronting problems related to lack of clarity in terms of, whom to approach, how to get hold of the land, because the laws were not clear, rights were not recognized, rights meaning the customary and traditional rights were not recognized. And as a result of it, the United Nations systems itself started looking at this critical issue, because it was stated that, across the developing world particularly, or across the natural resource-rich world, conflicts and violent conflicts became very popular. So a global discussion was sponsored by the Food and Agricultural Organization. And subsequently, I mean, there were in fact regional conferences in which hundreds of people attended. There was a Southeast Asian, African, you name it, all over the world, all sponsored by FAO. And subsequently in 2012, there was what is called as the Voluntary Guidelines on Tenurial Rights and Governance over Land, Fisheries and Forests. And incidentally, that was in 2012. Incidentally, in India, Forest Rights Act was promulgated 6 years before and is considered to be the most better than the voluntary guidelines. Now comes another aspect of what has emerged, that is on technologies. Earlier we used to say that, that technologies was, the growth of technology was exponential. Now that phase is gone long back, especially after the chips came up, the Intels came up, the computers, the internet, artificial intelligence. So when all these things came up, it was realized that it is the technology is not just growing exponentially, but the exponential growth of technology itself is exponentially growing. So you can imagine what kind of changes that is already emerging. Just to list out a few, while internet and computers were considered to be what is called as the disruptive technology. Why it is disruptive means it was disrupting the existing kind of systems, structures of power, methods by which production was carried out. Now you have wonder technologies like blockchain. Now blockchain was applied in what you call as Bitcoin. It's heavily deployed in what is called as cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies, there's a big debate on whether we should legalize cryptocurrencies or not. Even governments have now started investing on cryptocurrencies. You have digitization. You have what is called as the gene editing CRISPR. CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. In other words, through genetic gene editing, you can do anything. You can reproduce yourself, you can have meat without cattle. You can have vegetables without crops. You have, like Tesla, already has cars with, which sense what is around and make sure that you don't crash or have accidents. In fact, Tesla is fitted with the kind of possibility of it being driven by itself. In other words, driverless cars. You have 3D printing. China, you must have noticed, China actually constructed a house through 3D printing in just one day or a few hours or whatever. You know what is 3D printing? You just imagine your printer. You put in the ink and you put the paper and you press a button and you get a copy of what image we have sent through your computer to the printer. It's a very similar thing. You put in the stuff, put in the formula, and out comes the product. A number of products which is used in aeroplanes are done by 3D printing. So, in other words, a whole lot of things can be printed or manufactured without labor. You also have new kind of mechanisms in the market, like what you call as online platforms. A classical thing is your Ola and Uber. You have Airbnb or whatever, for stay. You have your retail stuff in Amazon, kind of things. There is virtual reality is another aspect that is emerging. Artificial intelligence, automation, big data, cyber security, renewable energy, artificial embryos, smart technologies, and of course, we do have a number of cities in India which we call as smart cities. So in other words, the intelligent technologies are replacing labor. We are assured of employment or jobless growth. And the discussion is on to what is called as, that is, when there is no job, then there is no income, and if there is no income, your economy has a problem because you cannot consume. So now the discussion is on universal basic income, that everybody will get a certain amount, irrespective of whether you have a job or not, so that the economy and the system functions. Now, where the money comes from, not to worry. The new technologies, the labor-less technology-based production will accumulate huge capital, which can actually provide this income. It's already being experimented, tested. I think one of the Scandinavian countries even had a referendum whether you want to go to you want to adopt universal basic income. And people actually voted against it, not because they didn't like it, simply because, I think it was Sweden, simply because they felt that if you have this kind of system, people from every other country will start pouring in. So there will be chaos. Now, given all these changes, what is happening to our nation state? Is there a nation state? Is there a national sovereignty? If there is no national sovereignty, what is the point or what is the meaning of electoral democracy? Where countries like India were earlier called as welfare state, and in a welfare state, we were basically looking at the public sector, the government to provide the basic services. Whether they are economically self-sustaining was never a point. Nobody ever bothered to ask such a silly question that a public sector should be profitable. That was never been there. Today we have accepted the the ridiculous logic that public sector has to be profitable. Otherwise, close it down, sell it off. You also see certain other changes which is taking place. For instance, the government is moving out from a lot of activities, lot of control into what is called as autonomous institutions. You already have one in the RBI, you have TRI, you have SEBI. You name every sector, now there are regulatory bodies which are supposed to be autonomous. What do you mean by autonomous regulatory bodies? It's a very simple thing, It is autonomous. It can now need not be bothered about electoral democracy. It doesn't have to be bothered about the politicians saying anything, giving any promises. It doesn't have to be bothered about the party manifesto or the national agenda or the constitution. All it has to bother about is the market and the need of the capital. So according to that, these regulatory bodies have to fine-tune in such a manner that anything and everything that happens in this country is beautiful. It is tuned to economic success. And we are proud of it. Now, whatever is left of the public sector, after having it being hived away to various corporate sector, now we have concluded that a metro has to be profitable. If it is not running profitability, it is wrong. It has to be closed down. It has to be handed over to the private sector. Air India is not running profitably, and therefore it is totally corrupt, and as though the successful, economically successful companies, corporate sector is perfectly right in all ways. As though they are not corrupt. So when this kind of shift in the role of government has happened, a shift in our own consciousness in accepting that the business of the government should not be business. In fact, the business of the government is militaristic surveillance. And in such a kind of a situation, where is electoral democracy? What do the poor politicians do except other than playing dirty politics? What else is there other than to accuse another politician? All the hype. And imagine all those juicy stories being dished out and propagated through the social media. It's there, it's completely overwhelmed our consciousness. That we simply don't know what is real and what is mythical. When electoral democracy has no sense or has got less sense and less role, there is a question of that, what is then the role of an elected, of the elected government? Now, when you talk about elected government, we might have a notion, a mistaken notion that, maybe the government is involved in governance. Take the classical case of India. We inherited a colonial administrative system. We continue to enact legislations to strengthen this colonial administration. When I say colonial administration, we are talking about the structures, You have your IAS, IPS, CLS, IRS, you name it, all kinds of cadres are there. So you have now a mixed structure of a feudal and colonial structure edifice here. It's a very interesting thing, to think that I, as a public, give you responsibility to govern. But then you don't have any government functions, governing functions. Somebody else does the government. You have this unique system where the people who are supposed to have accountability, that is the elected representatives, have no role in governance. What is the MLA's business? Legally speaking, I'm not talking about the way other politicking or other politics. I'm just saying in governance, does an MLA have any role? He's a lawmaker. MP is a lawmaker. Where is the minister? Does the minister have a role in governance? No, it's the officers who are there, the government staff, the various departments. But the politicians will have to say that we are the government, we are running the government. The bureaucracy is also very happy that the politicians are claiming that they are running the government, because it is also convenient for them. So now what happens, when you have a structure that has accountability but are not doing the governance, a structure which has no accountability but actually doing the governance, they are not in the same room. They are in two different spaces, basically. So for everything and anything, what they do is that they go out of the room, go and under the tree or under the table, they make the deals. You look at, just to see a comparison, like for example, in UK, who controls the police force, or in United States? It is the mayor or the governor. Who controls the collector? Is the MLA, MP, minister? Who is controlling? So we have this peculiar, it's not only the situation in India, I'm sure that many colonial, the erstwhile colonies, has a very similar kind of a structure. Now this is the kind of scenario which is there. From that, I'm just moving to another world. And that is the world of indigenous people or the tribals or Adivasis. Now, if you look at the history of the country through a simple prism of law, it's very concrete. A law is always an outcome of huge political dynamics, of various interest groups. And governments have to appease. See, a democracy, in a democracy, a government has to appease. I am consciously saying this, using this word, because, there is a popular notion that, governments should not appease. A party should not appease. Congress should not appease XY religion. Democracy is nothing but of appeasement. Appeasement of sections of people who have aspirations and demands, interest groups. Their job is to appease. But the conflict of interest or the contrast of interest requires the government to try to balance things. So that is why you will have a government enacting a law which is totally anti-people, and enacting another law on the same day or even the same week or month or year, which is totally pro-people. If you looking at the history of laws, you actually see broadly two streams. One, we can call it as a mainstream, and the other one, we have to call it an Adivasi stream. Now, what's the difference between these two? One difference we can see is that the mainstream consists of people who do not know what freedom is all about. Why? Because either they were enslavers or they were slaves. I refer to caste. Now, if you look at the Adivasi stream, they were free and they continue to be free, and they have a living memory of freedom, and therefore they know what freedom is all about, because they never enslaved anybody, or nor did they actually become slaves. By and large, there are Adivasi communities who got enslaved. That's a different matter. Now, what happened was that whenever the feudal caste structure entered into an Adivasi territory, they always withdrew. They kept withdrawing and withdrawing more into the forest. And that's how the Adivasis in this country became known as largely forest people. The manner in which they organized their life was different from the feudal system of organization of life. When I say organization of systems of life, I also primarily mean the manner in which they organize production and distribution. We know in the feudal order, it is a graded system of surplus extraction, very stable structure for exploitation. But whereas if you look at the Adivasi mode of production, they have no property, land did not belong to them, they belong to the land. The product of your labor does not belong to you or your family, but belong to the whole village. If you hunt, it's not, you cannot consume it, or it's not your proper this thing. It belongs to the whole community. If you have some brilliant song, you're creating a song. It is not your song, but it is a community song. So all products of labor and, physical and mental belong to the community. It was always collective. So there was a collective consciousness. The worst punishment, for instance, is, throwing you out of the village, banning you from the village. That's worse than death. So they had a different kind of system. And as a result of that kind of system, by and large, we say that, they have an egalitarian society. The women have better status within their community than the women in the feudal system. We say that inequality is lesser within them, etc., etc. So you have a different system of life. We must also remember very clearly that if you look at the whole from a civilizational point of view, the only civilization which continued to retain largely the same principles without getting, changing, is the Adivasi system, because that shows, that itself is indicative of its resilience, that it continues even today in some form or other, however distorted it may be. And that they desire that, you find it in the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, or in various forms, they still insist that we want to live like this, we want to have a different economic and political system. In fact, it is now recognized as part of in the UN Declaration. So we see this thing. So during the feudal era, the Adivasi territories were largely, even though they might be, either they are outside, they are in the periphery. Even if they are inside, they are just nominally part of the realm. The rule of the king hardly extended to the community. This was the pattern. Then comes the British. And when the Britishers came, one of the things they wanted was timber, and they moved into the forest, and then comes a series of clash. I have a list of, yes, if you ask about, how many recorded revolts were there against the Britishers, it's maybe about 200 or perhaps more than that. But generally, it is believed that about 100 to 150 revolts are very strong revolts. In other words, what we see is that, by and large, the feudal society subjugated themselves to the imperialist British colonists, because, they are used to understanding what slavishness is, either being enslavers or being slaves, they know what it is. So they easily succumb to the British. And here is an Adivasi community, who lived in freedom, and so they resisted and they fought, not just for a few years or a few days or a few months, for generations. And you look at I'm not going to read out all those things, but just what is fascinating is a number of things. Different communities leading different typologies of lifestyle across the country. In the Northeast, in central India, even in Andamans. Not just 1 year, you can see series of revolts. So there is a generation after generation, they kept revolting. You have, okay. So, and you see these revolts, it comes to and it starts from the 1700s. Now for us, we are told that the freedom movement started in 1857, Sepoy Mutiny. And the revolt also continues to spill over into the post-independence period. You had the Naxalbari. You have the self-rule movement during the from 1993 to 1996, which led to what is called as the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, the first law in this country which actually defined the powers of a habitation. I'm not talking about the Panchayat Gram Sabha, I'm talking about the habitation Gram Sabha. The first time people's powers were defined. And it was a law that was never discussed in the parliament before passing. It was a law that was passed at midnight so that people don't read. And subsequently, including the subsequent prime minister onwards to everybody, said that such a law passed. Then what is the need for a minister and a district collector, elections, if people are going to have all the power? I'm not saying, this is recorded minutes of the meeting of ministers and secretaries. And the Prime Minister at that time, I.K. Gujral, subsequently, he said that, such an important law, it should have been discussed in the parliament. Then you have, based upon that concept of direct democracy or participatory democracy, a subsequent movement came in 2002 to 2006, which, in 3 years, again 3 years, it led to what is called as the Forest Rights Act. It expanded the notion of people's power. So what does this history point out? It points out that this is a community which continuously has fought for generations and continue to fight even now. Now, this struggle has also led to the creation of certain laws. The Central Indian region was called as a non-regulated region under what is called as the Regulation 13 of 1833, which means that these are not regulated by the British and British regime, which means that you regulate yourself. You had the Wilkinson Rule, 1837 in Chaibasa in Kolhan, which actually legally recognized the monkey munda system. And people in Kolhan even today say that, we are not ruled by anybody, but we are self-ruling nation. That is in West Singhbum area. You have what is called as the inner line permit, which is created under what is called as the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation of 1873. It is there in Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, hill areas of Manipur, Nagaland. It's like, if you want to enter that area, you are supposed to get something like a visa from the police commissioner as an internal visa for us to move in there. You cannot hold land beyond that line. You cannot buy land. In fact, I think last year or so, this inner line permit, which was only there in the hill areas of Manipur, has been extended for the whole of Manipur. You had the Scheduled Areas District Act of 1874, which basically exempts the application of British laws in certain but the districts which are declared as the scheduled district. In the central Indian region, you had the Santal Pargana Tenancy Act of 1876, Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act 1908, which basically protects the land and its natural resources, says that it belongs to the community. In fact, governments, recent Jharkhand governments have tried desperately to amend this law to make the land available to the corporate sector in the name of development and growth, passed by the assembly, sent to Draupadi Murmu. She was sympathetic to the protests that emerged, which also led to a few people getting shot and killed. And subsequently, it was rejected by the president. Then you had the Government of India Act of 1935, which essentially said that in these areas, which is called as the scheduled area at that time, it's called partially scheduled area, partially excluded area and excluded area, meaning that excluded from the governance and the laws of the British, that is parts of Northeast. Then you have what is called as the partially excluded area, which is in the central India. Just 1 second, please. Partially excluded area, some laws are applicable. That is largely in the central Indian region. Now, what is very interesting is that in the 1935 Government of India Act, a law is not applicable to you until and unless the Governor General in Council says it is applicable with or without modification. Whereas law is applicable in the rest of the country, but not here, until and unless the Governor General in Council says yes. Now, many of these things then subsequently gets reflected into the Indian Constitution under Article 244, called the 5th Schedule and the 6th Schedule. The partially excluded area became the 5th Schedule, where PESA Act is there, Panchayat Extension Scheduled Areas Act of 1996. Then you have what is called as the 6th Schedule, which was largely the excluded areas in the Northeast, where it is called as a state within a state, meaning that there is an autonomous district council which has legislative powers on certain subjects, besides powers over civil and criminal action on issues related to land and natural resources. In the 6th Schedule area, there is no panchayats. Panchayats are not applicable. What is there is whatever is the desire of, whatever is the structure of governance that the communities had or want to have is accepted. Now, if you look in terms of the area, 5th Schedule area is in 10 states, covering 77,564 villages, in 664 blocks, 45 districts fully scheduled, 63 districts partially scheduled. In other words, it covers 11.3% of the land area, 5.7% of the total population, 35.2% of the scheduled tribe population. You have also the 6th Schedule area. There are 10 autonomous districts, 3 in Assam, 3 in Meghalaya, 1 in Tripura. 68% of Tripura is under the 6th Schedule. 3 in Mizoram, covers 1.7% of the land mass, 0.6% of the population, total population of India, 4.2% of the scheduled tribe population. Now, why I'm saying that these figures, what is important is that, that these are very significant figures. And if you add to this state of Nagaland and Mizoram, Nagaland under Article 371A has special provisions which says that any matters related to land and resources, law created by the parliament is not applicable either in Nagaland or in Mizoram until and unless the assembly decides through a resolution to extend it. For customary and other things, traditions, they have the power. Nagaland and Mizoram doesn't have panchayat system. They have rejected that. They have their own systems. In fact, in Nagaland, you have laws which recognizes the territory of 16 different tribal communities. I mean, Naga is not one single tribe, it is 16 tribes. And within the tribes, you have village councils, regional councils. You have Communitization Act in 2002 in Nagaland, where up to middle school were handed over to the villages, property, functions, functionaries, everything. You had up to mini primary health center handed over to the villages. Electricity services handed over to the villages. Interestingly, after handing over, things improved so much that UNESCO went and gave Nagaland a prize for rapid change in the educational status. WHO gave award to Nagaland for health status, improvement of health status after it was handed over to the village. You look at we have a colonial mentality. We want everything to be handed over to the bureaucrats. There, they don't want the bureaucrats. They want everything by themselves. In other words, the mainstream simply can't think beyond or outside the box of feudal and colonial setup. We can't think of what democracy is all about or a democratic governance is all about. Now, in contrast to this, it's important to see what the mainstream did all these years. They continue to strengthen the colonial administration, the bureaucrats, more and more powers. A district collector will be heading about 200, 300 committees in the district. He himself doesn't know how many committees he's holding. And more laws are being, notifications are issued, like the recent, the eco-sensitive zone, where who is the head of the monitoring committee? It is the district collector, the DFO. So everything is, the power is vested in bureaucracy, not in the democratic structures. Realizing that this track is bad, there are many reports. You have read the Administrative Reforms Commission of India reports, which is a Government of India report itself. A lot have been written about it. There was also conflict between the political executive and the administration. They were always in conflict. They were always in competition. They were also collaborating outside the room. And there we talk about corruption. And when we talk about corruption, we have absolutely no shame other than to say that the politicians are corrupt. But then if you ask a question that, how many of us have actually bribed a politician? How many of us have actually bribed a government official? Most of us would have bribed a government official, not a politician. Now, given that situation, it was decided, it was felt that, that the political executive should, or electoral democracy should start taking control over governance. And when you say governance, governance is actually in the villages, in the municipalities, in the panchayats. And therefore, the 73rd Amendment and the 74th Amendment. The 73rd Amendment said 29 subjects have to be transferred to the panchayats. 74th Amendment said 18 subjects have to be transferred to the municipalities. Now, what do you mean by transfer? It simply means that the funds, functions, and functionaries have to be transferred. Where is it transferred? You look at any of the state laws, instead of the panchayat controlling the departments, the panchayats become an extension or an appendage to the departments. Or they become a mediator between the masses and the department. Of course, with all the pretense that they are running the show. And not only that, in the 74th Amendment, there is an exemption clause. What is the exemption clause? Net result? Forget about election. We don't want even electoral, the right to vote. Has anybody noticed it? I'm sure that, the feudal colonial mindset can never understand it. So therefore, there were no protests. In other words, there is a category of places called industrial township. First, I think, being Jamshedpur. In an industrial township, it is a corporate who runs the show. All municipal services or services, public services, is handed over to the corporates. Earlier, it was done at the state level. The governor used to notify it. In 74th Amendment, it became part of the Indian Constitution. No protest. Then subsequently, we had the great Special Economic Zone, 2005, which actually frames what one can call as a corporate nationhood. The police cannot enter. It has to have separate codes, separate security, and a separate everything. I mean, laws not applicable, etc., etc. And many of the large special economic zone were to be notified or are being notified as industrial township. So it also gets a constitutional backing. When all these things happened, what is very strange is that in March 2010, the Ministry of Panchayat Raj drafted 3 sets of constitutional amendment and sent it to all the states, asking for comments. I'm sure that there is no single article written by anybody anywhere. No media has covered it because they simply didn't understand it. Now, these 3 constitutional amendments basically says that, the mainstream structure and the system is trash. It's better to adopt what the tribals have done. What they have done is that they have, through the history from colonial period, the post-colonial, post-independence period, including this present century, they have continued to struggle and to deepen democracy, to spread the democracy beyond the scheduled area. It is now spread to it is in law, it has spread to about 21% of the forest area, 22-23% that's the forest area in this country. So there is a stream which is a stream that is showing a path towards deepening and strengthening democracy, and therefore, why not adopt their system? The problem is that the tribals think that, that whatever is related to these laws are only tribal laws. The mainstream thinks that, that is tribal laws and it's got nothing to do with us. Actually, it's all about democracy. So, I'm not saying or making any conclusion that, that kind of a structure of democracy where you are creating not decentralization, you are actually, they're talking about a non-centralized kind of a governance system. The question which should be in our mind is that whether it poses a possibility of evolving a legitimate counter-hegemonic forces to what we are seeing is happening. Thank you.